Hello guys, it's Chouzetsu here doing another episode of Reimagining Beyblade Burst. This time we have part 13, Hasbro. So this part's going to be a very weird one. So first up, it is based on the Hasbro exclusive bays. I'm not doing any Hasbro exclusive evolutions of a pre-established motif because I've already generally covered these. For example, things like, a DB version of Balder. Well, I already did that in like part 8, so we're not covering those. We're just covering the unique motifs from the line. And there are a lot of them. Now, of course, this is just my usual setup of, conceptualizing them. Again, I don't have any sort of resources to either commission all of these or model them myself or draw them or whatever. So this is just kind of conceptualizing how I would transform the Hasbro exclusive bays into proper Takara Tomy bays. Also, unlike every other part, I don't actually own every bay here. I never bothered to buy Hasbro bays except for the 2-pack, which had the bays that you see on the screen right now. Never bothered to buy any other Hasbro stuff, and I don't want to anyway. I don't like Hasbro Burst, so I'll have to go through images for this one, which is weird, but yeah, instead of doing the typical thing where I, show stuff physically, I'll have to go through images and I'll have to explain it that way. Kind of odd, but is what it is. So yeah, very weird part, but yeah, let's just go ahead and kind of get started. Hopefully it makes some sense as we get going. So starting off with the dual layers. There are no single layers for Hasbro exclusives, but we do have some dual layers. These are mostly just the same, generally speaking. So you would need to give them kind of different letter abbreviations, because obviously these overlap with dual layers, which, yeah, that's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. First up here we have Dynamic Diomedes Triple XL. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm probably not. But yeah, that one fairly straightforward. We also have Hyper Hyris Yell Needle. Straightforward. Next up is Infernal Istros Upper Survive. Then Obscure Orpheus Armed Defense. Soot Surtur Spread Quake. And Trepid Tyros Infinity Zephyr. I believe all of these are just name changes. Fairly confident I did not make a single change to the parts here. Basically, these would all just look slightly different. The plastic would be, less fogged. They're probably, actual stickers for detailing rather than like the printed ones. And yeah, just the name changes. These are fairly straightforward. I didn't do a whole lot with these. However, after this, we do have to do some work, because we actually have to switch, get past, Switch Strike / God into, of course, the line after where they really changed up like everything with Hasbro stuff, so that'll be fun. And now it's time to handle Beyblade Burst Turbo, Hasbro's adaptation of Chouzetsu, which was something else. I tried to keep the combos relatively similar, but I thought some were kind of bad, so I changed up some of them, but again, tried to keep them fairly similar. Also had to add some frames on the stuff, and again, changing the names. Also had to give a lot of the layers gimmicks, and again, you'd also have to assume that these, would look like Takara Tomy bays, and again, being, Chouzetsu bays, they'd have metal. Starting off, first up here, we have Horn Balar 6 Glaive Jaggy Dash, so I'm not going to mention the name change for everything, that's just kind of a given here. But the whole thing for this one, so I did give Glaive just because I thought that made sense, and Spiral, that's a stupid choice, so I thought Jaggy Dash seemed like a solid, replacement. And as far as the layer goes, I have the kind of main blades on the layer. They would shift outwards as the bay, loses clicks. Moving on, we have Ocular Cyclops 5 Meteor Flugel. So again, added a frame, makes sense. But the main stuff here is the layer. The metal parts on the outside of the layer, they would move outside during battle for stamina. So kind of move outward. Just the metal itself would move outward. Again, nothing too crazy, but it makes some sense, I think. And again, you have to imagine that there is actual metal on this thing to move, because again, they didn't quite do that with the Hasbro stuff. Anyway, moving on to Halberd Dullahan 7 Cross Tower Dash. So again, we added a frame, also made it tower, dash driver. And keep in mind, for my previous reimagining parts, tower is actually inverted with how it functions. And now here's the most interesting part, because I felt like the main blades on the layer were a bit disconnected in a sense, so I decided to kind of play into that. So as the Bay loses spin, the blades would actually kind of move. They would angle themselves downward more. So this could make for some pretty insane upper attacks as the Bay loses spin, and also loses height, so I thought that could be kind of cool. And that's the gimmick I opted to lean into here. Next up, we have Pillar Gargoyle 8 Dagger Massive. So, again, added a frame here, but also I would have metal parts inside the layer, so you wouldn't really be able to see them too well. Maybe like if there's like translucent parts, you'd see them a little bit, but yeah. They actually move downward towards the disc, actually even dropping down kind of onto the disc almost. So that'd be the whole layer gimmick, kind of just the weight distribution lowers over time. Again, a bit of a weird gimmick, but I do think that could be at least interesting to check out. And again, I've already done so many gimmicks, so like, I'm really trying to think of what could work, so anything that seems like it could work here. And these are Hasbro based, I don't have gimmicks anyway, so I might as well go for it, I guess. Moving on to Myth Kraken 11 Proof Prevail. Alright, so added a frame, of course, and the Prevail driver would actually be a new driver here. So it's basically just survive, but with like a moment cover around it that could also again move around, spins. Basically just moment, but survive in the middle instead of a ball. As far as the Myth Kraken layer goes, there would be metal parts kind of on the sides, and then there'd be a little bit of an upper layer that moves, which would also have metal on top of it. You can kind of shift this upper layer around on the bay. You could have basically metal on all 4 sides, kind of evenly distributed, or you could pair it to be on just 2 sides. So have some versatility there. Next up we have Shade Morrigna 2 Angle Loop. So yeah, added a frame, kept this one fairly straightforward. Now, the top part of the layer would basically be able to move kind of like Jet or Ratchet. Well, the Jet ring from, Jet Wyvern, or, Ratchet, the disc that Wizard Fafnir has. It kind of has that outer part that just moves like that. So, yeah, just kind of a layer that does that in Chouzetsu. It seems like a decent gimmick for the time. Next up we have Paroxysm Ogre 1-Hit Hunter Dash. Okay. So again, we added a frame here because I thought it made sense with kind of the one idea. Also, swapped out the driver for Hunter Dash because I just felt like it was a better choice of driver here. Kind of plays into being a better attacker as well. It kind of has that one main contact point. Now, there's also, some metal on the layer, but the metal itself would actually shift towards the main contact point. Actually, there's metal distributed around the layer, but the metal itself would move on like a rail kind of system. And even if it's on the opposite side, it would eventually start to move towards that point and gather in that area. So it kind of starts off being, more balanced, but over time, yeah, it shifts towards the that main contact point, which would be kind of interesting. Again, that happened as it would lose stamina. Next up we have Facet Rudr 12 Turn Fusion Dash. Added a frame, of course. Also made Fusion a dash driver. Just seems to make sense by this time. And then yeah, the contact points could be turned individually with a hinge on the center of each of the blades. So basically what I mean is like, these blades seem very thin in a way, and there'd be a hinge in the center of them, so you can kind of move them kind of to the, downwards to the left, downwards to the right. You can kind of choose how you want to move these around, right? So one would have them kind of facing outwards, which would make it, better for attack, although very recoil heavy, but also you can kind of move it kind of inwards in that sense, so the blades are sticking outwards, more to the right, sticking upwards, which would make it more defensive. Hopefully it makes some sense. You kind of get an idea of what I mean by that, but yeah. The blades just kind of move, depends on how you want the contact points. So that's that bay. Moving on, we have Arid Sphinx, 6-ax Excel dash. Okay, so this one. So again, added a frame, made, a dash driver, cool. And yeah, I did use axe earlier already, so by Chouzetsu this would actually make sense. So with Arid Sphinx, the blades on this one, you can kind of move them around. You'd be able to kind of push them in to make it actually pretty flat, or you can move it out to be, kind of its normal mode, which is how you would see it right now, the literal version of the layer. Or you can kind of push them out further to kind of extend them to, again, make them more apparent, again, kind of more attack-oriented and recoil-heavy. And the last of the Chouzetsu bays here. We have 100 Typhon 4-wall defense. Added a frame. But, yeah, the layer itself, the metal inside the layer, would just be able to move. It'd just be completely on a rail, but it wouldn't be, like, structured in any way. It would just be free to move however it wants, all of the metal. This would basically just make it extremely chaotic. And that's the whole point of this bay. The metal just moves as it pleases. And it would be kind of crazy. It could cluster to one, kind of one side, making it very unbalanced. It can maybe kind of stay relatively even at some points. It would just be a very, very chaotic bay, which I think would be kind of interesting to watch. And again, just seems like an interesting gimmick that I haven't really tried out yet. So why not try it out here on one of these just random Hasbro exclusives? But yeah. Anyway, that's it for the turbo bays. There's a lot to get through. I think this is the biggest, or yeah, I think it's the biggest section. So let's go ahead and move on to our next one. And now we get to the Beyblade Burst Rise exclusives. Again, we have to make these into GT bays, kind of similar to what we saw before. Have to kind of, have some changes, take some liberties with the combos, but try and make them into actual bays. Also, I added weights that I thought made sense based on the original combo, so it is what it is. So we'll go ahead and start off here with, oh, and also, before I get into this, some of these were like the weird like GT prize bay bases. They gave them new chips, so I opted to, well, since we already have those bases dealt with in part 4, I gave all those motifs that had those bases new bases. So yeah, anyway, let's just go ahead and start. First up here we have Bane Cyclops Sting Guard Dash Zan. So, alright, so this originally had Knuckle. I didn't want Knuckle, so we swapped out for Sting. I thought that made some sense and paired well enough. Also, Guard Dash, Guard. So the Guard I made in part 2, basically it just allows the extra outer piece to free spin. So it's the updated version of Guard and also, Dash version of it. And now for the layer, Bane Cyclops. So the outside of Bane would basically just have like a bound part to it. The outer part is just bound, is what it is, which is also kind of why I gave it Sting. So this one, fairly straightforward. Next up we have Scale Cobra Convert Coil 10. Okay, I have to explain this one because Hydra got renamed to Cobra and then they made Hydrax, so obviously, because I'm using Takara Tomy names, Cobra was Hydra. But Hydrax is too similar to Hydra, so we're going to go back to Cobra. We're kind of almost swapping the names, I feel, but yeah, anyway. So yeah, for Scale Cobra, this bay, I just gave it Convert. I thought the shape itself made enough sense, and I guess it gives like an extra gimmick. Now the coil driver, this is basically a large ball driver attached by a spring. Yeah, that is what it is. That would be a very, very weird driver to see in action, but would be an interesting one. And then we have scale Cobra. So the scale base. All right, the 4 main contact points would kind of be attached by springs. So yeah, they'd be kind of bound in a sense, but also just weird. Could be cool to check that one out. Moving on, we have Cosmic Kraken Hurricane Valor 10. Yes, I know Cosmic is similar to Cosmo, but it is still different, so I kept it. Anyway, so the disc, I did swap it to Hurricane because I just thought it made more sense. Also, the Valor driver, it's basically a taller version of Survive, but also wider. Almost like a wide defense, but not quite that wide, but closer to it. Yeah, it's meant to be quite tall as well. And then we, of course, have, the Cosmic Base. This is meant to be very, very round, even more round than Cosmo. And also, the underneath part would be free spinning. Kind of similar to Cosmo, probably, but a little bit different, but yeah. This bay is meant to be kind of just taller than other bays, and again, you have Hurricane on this thing to play into the free spin as well, and again, you have the underneath part that free spins, and yeah, the driver makes this bay tall, so you'd mainly be hitting these the free spinning stuff. Moving on to Tactile Leviathan around Zephyr Dash 10. Okay. So I could have used the so weight here, but I opted to just use 10. I thought, let's not make it too similar to Tact. I already kind of ripped off the name with Tactile. So anyway. The disc, swapped out to just use around. I thought it just worked better overall. And then also, yeah, Zephyr Dash I just thought was a fine driver to use here. As far as the base goes, it's actually pretty similar to Tact. However, the blades would be able to move much, much further. Rather than just kind of having a slight bit of movement to them, they'd be able to move pretty much as far as they want. As far as the base allows them to move. They could move straight out. They could be kind of, inward. They could just move as much as they want. And they can move to the opposite side of the base. These things are crazy. However, they are just unaffected by weights. So they have a much more movement, but you don't have any control over them based on the weight. They just move around a lot. Which I think would be kind of interesting to see. Next up here we have Monster Ogre Blitz Octave Dash Rets. Okay, this one. So I thought Blitz just made the most sense because this does kind of go for a 3-sided design rather than the 1-sided design that we had in the original version of Ogre, but anyway. So I thought, Blitz seemed like a sensible choice. And then there's Octave Dash. Okay, this is a fun one. It's basically Octa, with the metal and everything on the bottom, and also like the kind of octagon design. However, the bottom part's flat. It's basically comes to kind of a flat that's maybe around, maybe slightly bigger than Assault, but it's in an octagon shape with all the metal, so it's kind of like Charge in that sense, but again, with an octagon pattern, also wider, but like a weirder shape. It's an interesting driver, but why not? Octave Dash. And then we have Monster Ogre, the monster base. So basically, metal would kind of shift towards a main contact point. It'd kind of be on the 3 sides, but yes, over time they would kind of move to one side. So they'd kind of bunch up on each side of one contact point, which would be kind of interesting to see. So yeah. And lastly, for the GT Beys, we have Solar Sphinx, Vanguard, Jaggy, Dash, Zam. Alright, so the disc, I just thought Vanguard worked fine here, and also Jaggy Dash I just thought would, it'd fit the best. And as far as the solar blade, the solar base goes, it's basically just like how the previous Sphinx was, where they'd be kind of flat, extended out slightly, kind of how it is normally, or again, just extended even further to kind of have larger contact points, so pretty versatile, but yeah, that's it for the GT Beys. Not as many this time at least, but again, hopefully there was at least some interesting stuff here. And now we have Beyblade Burst Surge. Okay. There's only one bay here, but we had to make it into a Sparking bay, and yeah, these are quite different because they don't really use the same system at all. Not even close. So, as far as our one bay here goes, though, we have Spear Dullahan High Tower Dash 2 Balance. Okay. I gave this 2 balance because I just thought it made more sense than like a boost, like this thing initially had. That was not great. Also, this ring would allow 2 balance to basically be used in either mode, so you have that going for it. High Tower Dash, just High Tower Dash. I mean, again, it gets shorter as it, loses spin, as my version of Tower does, but the base driver is just taller than normal. As far as the spear ring goes, the blades would, like the original Dullahan, shift downwards during battle, again giving stronger upper attacks, but these would shift down much, much deeper, which would make sense because this bait is taller. So there you go, that's all there is for that one. That's all the Sparking base. Now we move on to the kind of final part of this, this episode, but trust me, it's probably the craziest one. And now we have the DB and BU bays. QuadDrive and QuadStrike. Okay. I based these on the original combos. And this thing does have the DB... These do use the DB system. However, they are, they're not great. The drivers are messed up, and a lot of stuff here just doesn't have... They don't have gimmicks. They're not good. I based these on the original combos, but again, Hasbro by this point was just so awful that, yeah, some restructuring was in order. In case you haven't noticed, I have not been, cutting the video between each bay like I usually do, but for this part of the episode, I'm gonna have to, because, yeah, these bays all require a bit more explanation, I feel, even if it's not as long as a typical bay. Yeah, this is where the video's gonna get actually a bit longer, I think, so we'll see how this goes. Alright, so first up here we have Wrath Cobra, Aquilon Coil Dash 4. I just thought 4 made sense here anyway. Cobra, this would just be a gimmickless core. But the Wrath Blade, okay, this would have springs holding up the main 4 contact points, similar to what we saw with Scale. So pretty straightforward there, just a DB version of that. Aquilon, this would just be kind of an upscaled version of what we saw with Hasbro's Aquilon. Yes, this is kind of a word. Somewhat, so I kept it. But anyway, yeah, basically for these Hasbro exclusive like DB or BU discs, when they make sense, I just upscale them to just be kind of how they would be with Takara Tomy. And of course, Coil Dash. I mean, I think it just makes sense. It's a Dash version of Coil, which we saw in the previous version of Cobra. So this one just seemed fairly straightforward to make, I think. Next up here we have Berserk Linwyrm, Shutter Hunter Dash 2. Okay, so 2 again makes sense. Now, Linwyrm, this core will actually have some stuff going on. This will have some metal parts just on the center of the core. Just a little bit of metal. Then we have the Berserk Blade. So on the blue parts of this blade, there would be rubber. The blue parts would be rubber, and then there would also just be some metal behind that rubber, so... Yeah, I think that'd be interesting to have some contact points reinforced with metal, but instead of plastic, it's rubber. Now, then there is Shutter. This would be, basically, this is a renamed version of Ficor. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a renamed version of that and also just upscaled to be a proper disc. And then Hunter Dash, I based on its original armor tip, but again, to be, sensible here, so... This one should be, again, fairly straightforward overall. And now we have a fan favorite, and also actually the last of the regular QuadDrive bays, and that is Katana Muramasa Region Mobius-10. So again, 10 makes sense, but the Muramasa core, this would have a very, very slight bound property to it, even slighter than the Dragon core, so... Just a little bit of a bound, and also be very stiff, so wouldn't move as easily, but also just wouldn't move as far. Next up, for the Katana blade, this would have 2 large metal blades. And again, this is not an attack bay or anything, but, just has two large blades would be pretty good, just overall, I think. You could probably use it for balance if you really wanted to, but technically a defense bay, but still. This bay was just too cool to not give two giant metal blades to, let's be real. Anyway, next up we have Region, the disc. This is a renamed version of Quachu, its original disc, and again, upscaled to make sense. And then Mobius Dash is based on its original driver, but again, made to just be sensible. So yeah, very cool bay. I just couldn't resist giving this thing two giant metal blades. I mean, look at this thing. I had to do it. I think everyone understands why I had to do it, even if it's not something you'd expect for a defense bay. I just had to do it. And now we get to the QuadStrike bays. Alright. So we have the first one here, Fierce Basilisk Region Flap-4. So again, 4 makes sense. Now Basilisk is actually renamed from Basilisk. I just thought it sounded a little bit better. This would also have a rubber lock and one set of BU locks. So there you go. The rubber would be a bit harder as well. It has less friction. Still, like, works fine, but not as good as like Bahamut or Kirbyus. But you have the one BU lock, and this BU lock is also towards the end as well. It's not like in the middle, so it's kind of a last resort. Like if this BU lock comes undone, like it's gonna burst pretty much immediately after. Anyway, then I have the Fierce Blade. This would kind of be like an inverted roar, so it gets more attack oriented as it kind of loses clicks, and then you have that BU lock at the end there to kind of help it stay in that attack state if it gets to that point. Region, I just thought made sense here. And then we have Flapdash. Flapdash, this is a flat driver, plastic flat. However, it's even wider than Assault, so it's like kind of this Gen's version of Extreme Flat. Maybe not quite as wide as Extreme Flat, but, fairly close. So I think that's something we could have probably used, so I made it here. It seemed like a pretty good time for it, so here it is. And now we have Ambush Nydhogg Tapered Rumble-7. Okay, so 7 and Tapered, I actually kept these, so these stayed the same. Next up we have Nydhogg. This would just have 4 sets of BU locks, that's all there is to it. Ambush, this blade would have metal behind its 3 main contact points, so pretty straightforward. And then there's Rumble Dash. This is a somewhat large ball. Maybe, it's not free spinning, but it's kind of similar to maybe Atomic, except again not free spinning. However, one side on the edge would be dented, so it would just have a really, really weird movement. And that's kind of all there is to that, so just sort of a bay with some awkward movement. Who doesn't like awkward movement? It's always interesting to watch, so why not have another driver with that kind of idea behind it? Now we have Hydro Poseidon Load Bite-2. Okay, so I thought, 2 made sense for this layer. Now we have the Poseidon core. This just has 2 sets of BU locks, that's it. And then there's the Hydro Blade. This would have rubber on the blade, but it's kind of in a ripple-like pattern, kind of just a wave of rubber. Kind of an odd choice, I feel, but it could be interesting. So it has some rubber in most locations, but not entirely covering the blade. Next up, Load. Load is kind of the same shape as something like Sting, except without the gimmick, and it's fully metal. It's the same disc that I gave to Gatling Dragon back in part 6. I basically just wanted this because it's kind of like a somewhat like 4-sided disc that's not, Nexus, because I don't think Nexus should be on anything other than Belial. But yeah, anyway. Then there's Bite Dash. Bite Dash, it's just based on the original driver, so again, fairly straightforward with that one. And now we have Ruin Pandemonium Karma Lucent-4. Okay, so I did opt to keep 4 and Karma on this thing, but everything else got a bit of an overhaul. First up, we have the Pandemonium core. This would have rubber on the inside of the lock, just the inside. You don't have those 2 extra rubber pieces on the outside, just the rubber piece on the very inside of like the teeth, basically. You also have small amounts of metal on the core, and kind of towards the middle, and also a set of BU locks. And then we have the Ruin Blade. This would have metal on the inside of the blade that would allow the blades to kind of stick out. It's kind of a weird idea, but yeah, basically the blades can kind of just stick out at random almost as the bay kind of spins. A blade can just pop out and then kind of go back in. But yeah, there's metal back there, so yeah, it just kind of acts as this really weird sort of attack pattern. Again, kind of random and strange, but it would probably give some extremely high recoil, powerful attacks, which I think would be kind of cool. Next up, the last part of this bay, Lucent Dash. This is kind of like Trick, except the outer part would be a full circle, rather than just like two small plastic pieces, and it'd be rubber. And then there's the inner sharp, which would be kind of rounded off to be a bit of a ball, and that would be metal. So it's kind of like a metal and rubber version of Trick. This bay is meant to be very, very random, very weird. Again, this was kind of like the main antagonist bay, I believe, of a QuadStrike, so I want to make it just a weird, interesting bay, which you have here, with kind of a more interesting dynamic version of Trick that you go from metal to rubber, and that'd be very different. And also, the blade would just have these different parts of the blade that just pop out with metal behind them. That'd be some pretty devastating attacks right there from that thing. And again, it's just kind of at chance. Some blades just pop out. It is what it is. But yeah, I want to make this bay fairly interesting, and again, I think it is, fairly interesting. And now we have the final bay/bays. Bear with me for this one. I'm basically going over Pandora. Pandora had 4 different versions, so I'm going to go over all of these and explain them. Just at one time. First up here we have Lightning Pandora, Over Never 7. So basically, to explain this one, okay. So Pandora itself, this would have 4 sets of BU locks, and it's the main Pandora core. Keep that in mind. But yeah, Pandora itself, it's just 4 BU locks. Anyway. Then we have the Lightning Blade. This would have the outer part of the blade free spin, and there are some special ports inside this blade. But yeah, the main thing about it is that it does free spin on the outside. 7, I just gave it 7, and then Over, I thought was kind of similar to what Twist was, so why not? And then Never, I just seemed to work pretty okay here. Trust me, there's kind of reasons why I'm maybe not putting as much into this bay. We'll come back to that later. Our next bay here is Flame Pandora, Aquilon Quick Dash 00. So again, Pandora, same thing, 4 sets of BU locks. Flame, this would have metal behind the main contact points to again give some better attacks. And again, you have these special ports inside this blade. 00, this is kind of a heavy armor, and it's also meant to be basically just a perfect circle, like even more than 0. So yeah. I kept a Aquilon on this thing, then I thought Quick Dash was, I just thought it made a little more sense than Jolt, so why not? So, Quick Dash just works. Next up here we have Tidal Pandora, Ridge Atomic Dash 6. Okay, so again, Pandora, 4 sets of BU locks. Tidal, this would just be full rubber on the outside. That's all there is to it. Also, again, special ports inside. 6 seem to make sense. Then we have the Ridge disc. This is a new disc. So Ridge is a primarily plastic BU lock disc. However, the very, very outer edge, or I guess ridge, of this blade is metal. And it's very heavy metal. That's where all the weight comes from. It's basically just extreme outward weight distribution. Because again, everything else inside is plastic here. And then Atomic Dash, I just thought it worked as a defense driver. I also got rid of Just on Jet Wyvern, so I'm not really sure if I'd even consider Just to exist, so I had to swap that one out. And Atomic Dash, that works. Next up here we have Twister Pandora, Region Gear 4. So, again, Pandora, 4 sets of BU locks. Then we have Twister. Twister would have kind of a special outer part that is bound. So yeah, the outer part of this blade entirely is just bound. So would be kind of interesting. And then, of course, 4 and region kind of were in the original, so why not have it here? And then we have gear. Gear would have manual mode changes. It's basically, there's a ball, however, a sharp can stick out from said ball. And also, then there is a kind of shroud, like a circular shroud you could bring down over it. That would just act as a very large flat. Kind of mimicking what we saw on Ruin Pandemonium's driver, kind of, with Lucent, where you have different modes. However, this one has a ball, sharp, and flat, but they are manual changes, so you have to choose which things you want sticking out. But you can have multiple things sticking out. You can have both the shroud, like the flat down, and also the sharp sticking out, if you want, or just everything up and just have it spin on the ball. So yeah, kind of a weird driver that just seems kind of fun, so why not? And with all of that said, we have the final product. Elemental Pandora Ridge Gear 00. So this is the culmination of everything. So you have, again, Pandora. This is the one from Lightning Pandora, as I mentioned earlier. That's why I said it was the main Pandora. And everyone that has, 4 sets of view locks. We'll skip past Elemental really quick. We'll go to the, again, 00, the armor. The one I made here, that's just a heavy circle. Ridge, got the outward weight distribution on that. And then, of course, we have gear with all of its manual mode changes. But now let's get to Elemental. So what is this blade? Basically, it is a combination of the other 4 blades. Now, I will say, this can only be used in high mode, and these blades have to be kind of thin, probably, overall, but that's what all the special ports are about. You can stack these on top of each other and make a large blade out of all 4 of these blades. Top to bottom, you would have Flame, Twister, Tidal, and then Lightning, so there you go. You'd have all the gimmicks. You got the metal contact points, the free spin, the rubber, the bound. Everything is there. This is kind of what I wanted to do with Pandora. Just have a proper Pandora with just every single blade in one. Go crazy. Stack the blades. And then each of the Pandoras basically gave you a part outside of the blade. Again, each one had a specific part, except for Lightning Pandora, but that one does have the main version of the core, so you basically do get a part from that one, which makes sense. But yeah, you can construct this bay if you have all of the other 4, and that was the entire idea behind this one. And there you have it. The entirety of the Hasbro exclusive motifs made into Takara Tomy versions of Beyblade Burst bays. It's been done. Finally. So, yeah, I want to just go over that, just talk about it. Thought it'd be interesting. So that's where this part came from. And we're finally done. And all that's left now is part 14, the finale of the series. And that will be my own original unique motifs, my own creations, basically. As a preview, there's only 2, but trust me, these are 2 of the most insane bays I've ever conceptualized, and the latter of the 2 is easily the most insane bay I've ever made, so stay tuned for that one. This video came out July 2nd, that one will be out July 4th, so very soon, but yeah. Anyway, that's all for this video, though. This was interesting to go over every Hasbro bay. That was a lot of talking, and, well, I assume probably a lot of editing since I do have to go over all the images, but anyways, yeah. That's all for this video. So anyways, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.